In August of 1852, an announcement spread through New Orleans that made even the most hardened traders on Esplanade Avenue stop speaking mid-sentence. A young enslaved man named Lucien, only 19, was about to be auctioned at the St. Louis Hotel, and the broker claimed he was the most beautiful male specimen ever recorded in Louisiana. Not strong, not valuable, not skilled, beautiful. A word that instantly turned the city into a storm of obsession, superstition, and fear. The notice listed measurements so precise that doctors questioned who, exactly, had been examining him, and why. It stated that 12 men had already tried to purchase him privately. It stated that 3 women had fainted the moment they saw him. And it stated, quietly in the last line, that Lucien had never spoken a single word in his life. What the crowds did not know was that by the end of that month, 6 people would be dead, 2 plantations would burn to their foundations, and a secret older than the city itself would be uncovered. A secret that Lucien had carried in silence since the day he was born. Before we uncover the disturbing truth, subscribe, hit that bell, and comment your state below. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The morning light over New Orleans did not so much rise as seep into the streets, thick and heavy as the river fog. The St. Louis Hotel, with its grand arcade and vaulted auction room, stood like a temple to commerce and cruelty, its white stucco walls already warming under the August sun. Carriages rattled toward it from every direction, wheels splashing through last night's rainwater, horses snorting, drivers cursing, the entire square pulsing with an anticipation that felt almost feverish. They had all heard the rumor. A boy, 19, enslaved, male, and beautiful. The word itself made men uncomfortable when applied to another man, but that only sharpened their curiosity. Beautiful, not strong, not broad-shouldered, not prime field hand. The broadsides pasted up all over the city had used the word deliberately, almost tauntingly, in letters thick as blood. The most beautiful male specimen ever offered in New Orleans. By 8 o'clock, the arcade was crowded with planters in linen coats, cotton factors, sugar men from the river parishes, brokers from Carondelet and Royal, foreign merchants with accents that clung like smoke. They formed small clusters, talking in low voices, their words buzzing under the high ceiling. You saw the notice? Everyone saw it. Never heard of such phrasing. Who is the boy's owner? Some estate down in Lafourche. Name slipped my mind. Lafourche, another man muttered. Those people breed strange things in that swamp. Laughter flickered, quick and uneasy. At the center of it all stood Henri Dupré, the broker who had arranged the auction. He was not a large man, but he carried himself with the brittle, nervous pride of someone who knew he had handled something dangerous and was barely keeping control of it. His sandy hair was damp at the temples. The lace at his cuffs trembled when he adjusted his cravat. He did not like crowds. He liked money. Today the two had become the same thing. Henri walked the edge of the room, pretending to inspect the polished benches and high windows, but his gaze kept sliding toward the door that led downstairs, down to the holding cells where the boy waited. What he did not know was that 3 hours from now, no one would be speaking of polish or benches or profit. They would be recounting screams, the sound of breaking glass, the sight of blood on marble. For now the chatter grew. I heard 12 private offers already, a man in a cream-colored suit said. All refused. Foolish, someone scoffed. Who refuses money before the hammer? The kind of man who thinks he can summon half the city by spreading mystery, another replied. And look around. It worked. They laughed again, but their eyes kept drifting toward the polished door on the far wall, the one that would open to reveal the auction block. Above it, shafts of sun carved bright stripes through the dust, turning the motes into drifting ghosts. A woman in a mauve dress, her neck wrapped in a lace collar too tight for the heat, whispered behind her fan. Do you think it is true? Her companion, younger and pretty in a shallow way, tilted her head. What? That women fainted when they saw him. The younger woman smiled faintly. Women faint when they see anything they are told to faint over. She said it lightly, but there was an edge under her words. There always was in this city where beauty and danger walked hand in hand. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew that 3 women had indeed collapsed when Lucien had been brought through the courtyard the night before, not because they were delicate flowers overcome by romance, but because his face had struck them with a terror they could not name. Henri felt a hand clap his shoulder. Dupré, you have outdone yourself. He turned to see Augustin Belmar, a planter whose holdings along the river were rumored to be held together by cruelty more than Cain. Belmar. Henri managed a smile. You are satisfied with the prospects? I am satisfied that the city is talking. Belmar's eyes gleamed. But I am curious. Silent boy? What does that mean? He is mute. Henri hesitated. That is what his papers say. But have you heard him? Henri swallowed. He has not spoken in my presence. Ah. Belmar's smile sharpened. Then perhaps he is simply wise. Henri did not like the way he said it. Wise. As if silence were a form of strategy, not affliction. Across the hall, two men stood near a column, their voices low and urgent. Their suits were too fine for simple planters. Their faces carried the pale, faded arrogance of old Creole families whose names had been written into the city's bones since the Spanish flag still hung over the cabildo. I tell you this should not be public, one hissed. It is done, the other replied. We learned too late. There must be a way to stop the sale. And invite questions? Tension. No. We watch. We bid. We take him back. Quietly. What if we fail? The second man's gaze hardened. We do not fail. They fell silent as Henri approached. He gave them his best professional bow. Messrs, I trust you are comfortable? We begin shortly. The older of the two fixed Henri with a look that felt like a threat wrapped in politeness. We are eager to see whether your description was precise, Monsieur Dupré. Henri's throat tightened. It was not my description, sir. The owner provided those words. Then I hope, for your sake, the owner has not lied. Henri moved away, pulse beating in his ears. He had read the papers himself. The measurements. The notes. The last line that had made even him uneasy. Subject has never spoken. Responds to commands with complete comprehension. No known physical defect of tongue or throat. Possible voluntary silence. Possible voluntary silence. As if the boy had looked at the world and chosen not to share a single word with it. At a side entrance, a group of younger men slipped in, their collars loose, their hair damp with sweat, the restless energy of gamblers about them. Reckon he is some quadroon-kept boy someone is tired of? One snickered. Maybe some widow's favorite thrown to market, another added. Such things happen. They laughed like jackals circling a rumor. In the far corner, near a window cracked for air, a black man in a coarse jacket stood holding a tray of watered wine. His name was Jonah, though no one here cared unless they needed to shout it. He had been hired out from a nearby household for the day's service. His gaze moved over the crowd in quiet assessment, but his thoughts were nowhere near their conversations. He had seen the boy. They had brought Lucien in after midnight when most of the city slept. Jonah had been in the lower corridor carrying a bucket when the door swung open and two white men half-dragged, half-led the chained figure inside. The lamplight had hit the boy's face and Jonah had almost dropped the bucket. He had never seen a face like that. Not on a man. Not on anyone. Keep your eyes down, one of the guards had snapped. Jonah had obeyed, but he had felt it, an odd electric pressure in the air, as if the boy's very presence bent the space around him. Now Jonah watched the white men crowd and wager and whisper over that same boy they had locked below. He felt a tightness in his chest he could not name. What he did not know was that before the day ended, he would be standing ankle-deep in shattered glass and spilled blood, holding a choice in his hands that would change his life forever. Up on the small balcony, a bell rang once, clear and cold. Conversation thinned as heads turned toward the auction door. Henri Dupré stepped onto the platform, his ledger clutched so tightly his fingers ached. Gentlemen, he called, voice echoing against the domed ceiling. Ladies, we thank you for honoring this house with your presence. The crowd settled like a breathing creature. In a few moments, Henri continued, you will witness an offering such as this city has never seen. Please, compose yourselves. He glanced once toward the side passage where the stair led down to the holding cells. Then he nodded to the handler waiting in the shadows. Bring him up. Bayou Lafourche in the 1830s was a place where the land itself seemed to breathe. The cane fields stretched out like green oceans, their stalks rattling in the slightest wind. Cypress knees jutted from swamp water like the ribs of something ancient and buried. Evening fog crawled across the ground long before the sun had disappeared, and the air carried scents of wet earth, crushed cane, and something darker, an oldness that felt older than the plantations themselves. This was where Lucien was born. His mother, Mara, was known across 3 neighboring estates as the woman who brought babies into the world with a gentleness so steady that even the hardest overseers respected her skill. Her hands were small but firm, her voice soft but commanding, and when she spoke, pain seemed to loosen its hold on those she tended. She had delivered nearly 60 children by the time she bore her own. But Lucien's birth did not go the way anyone expected. It happened in the middle of a thunderstorm that split the sky in furious jagged lines. Rain battered the shutters of the slave quarters, the wind howled through gaps in the roof, and the midwives, women Mara had helped dozens of times, whispered prayers as lightning lit the room like fire. Mara did not cry out once. The midwives exchanged nervous glances. Even the strongest women moaned, wailed, begged heaven or cursed God when labor took hold. But Mara only gripped the edge of the straw mattress and breathed, her jaw clenched, her eyes fixed on something distant. When the child slipped into the world, the storm outside went silent. So suddenly the midwives froze. Lucien did not cry. He opened his eyes instead. The women gasped. Newborns blinked slowly, foggily, struggling to adjust to light. But this child's gaze snapped into sharp clarity the moment his lids lifted. Golden hazel eyes, unusually bright, almost reflective, stared at each woman in turn. "He looked right at me," one whispered, her voice trembling. "That ain't normal," another murmured, stepping back. Mara reached for him, her fingers shaking, but not from fear. She pressed the baby to her chest, her face softening in a way no one had ever seen. "He is mine," she whispered, "and he is blessed." But the older midwife shook her head. Blessed is not the word some Gon use. By morning, rumors spread like fire over cane leaves. A child who hadn't cried. A storm that stopped the instant he appeared. Eyes that seemed too knowing. Too sharp. Too human for those who liked their human property quiet and predictable. The overseer, Rutherford Hale, a man with skin like cracked leather and a temper that turned quick as gunpowder, demanded to inspect the child personally. He stood over Mara's pallet, his boots muddy, his face twisted with suspicion. "Where is the boy's father?" he asked. Mara did not answer. Rutherford grabbed her jaw. "You hear me, woman? Who sired him?" Her voice came out steady. "Ain't none of your concern." Her defiance startled even the other enslaved people. Rutherford raised his hand as if to strike her, but something in Mara's expression, calm, unbending, made him hesitate. He stormed out, muttering that the boy would be trouble. He was not wrong. Lucien grew fast. Too fast, some said. By the time he was 5, he carried himself with a strange poised stillness, as though he were listening to things others could not hear. He did not babble like other children. He did not cry. He did not fight. He simply watched, searched, measured. His silence unnerved people. When spoken to, he nodded, tilted his head, or fixed those strange golden eyes on the speaker until they stumbled over their own words. The enslaved children avoided him at first, spooked by his stillness. But one girl, Eliza, 4 years older and bold enough to kick an overseer's son once, sat beside him under the pecan tree behind the quarters. "You don't talk," she announced, chewing a stalk of cane. "But you ain't stupid. You hear me just fine." Lucien blinked once. Eliza pointed at his chest. "You understand, don't you?" He lowered his gaze, then lifted it again, slow and deliberate. She smiled. "Good. Then we friends? Even if you ain't got words." Lucien did not smile back. But he leaned slightly toward her, and that was enough. Mara watched her son with a mixture of love and fear. Each year the boy grew more beautiful, painfully so. His features sharpened, his skin smooth and even, his hair curling in waves that the other women whispered over. Even the white mistress took notice. One afternoon, Mara was called to the big house. She went reluctantly, leaving Lucien with Eliza. When she returned, her face was pale. "Miss Adeline been asking questions," she whispered, pulling Lucien close. "She want you in the house tomorrow. She say she want to see you proper." Eliza frowned. "Why she want that?" Mara hesitated. She seen him in the yard. She say his face, too fine for a field child. She say he looked like he been carved from marble. Eliza's eyes widened. "That ain't good." Mara shook her head. "No, it ain't." That night, long after the quarters went quiet, Mara held Lucien against her chest, rocking slightly even though he did not cry. Her voice trembled. "You listen to me," she whispered, brushing curls from his forehead. "Silence gone keep you alive. Don't speak, you hear? Not a word. No matter what happen. You hold your tongue like it made o' gold. Promise me." Lucien's small fingers curled into her dress. He did not promise, he never spoke, but he understood. He understood everything. What Mara did not know was that the next morning would be the beginning of the end, the moment the world took notice of the boy she had fought so hard to protect. And it would be the last week she ever held him in her arms. By the time Lucien reached 11 years of age, the sugar estate had transformed into a place where silence traveled faster than sound. The men who worked the cane fields no longer joked in his presence. The women who stirred great iron pots of boiling syrup crossed themselves when he passed by. Even the children, once curious, had learned that the boy with the golden eyes watched the world in a way that made them feel transparent. But no gaze rested on Lucien more intensely than that of Miss Adeline Rousseau, the mistress of the plantation. Adeline was a woman of severe beauty, tall, pale, always dressed in soft pastels that contrasted sharply with the dark opulence of the big house. Her marriage had been arranged years before she ever understood what it meant to bind her life to a man who valued land more than companionship. Her husband, Jacques Rousseau, spent most of his energy on cane production, trade negotiations, and quiet affairs he assumed she did not notice. She noticed everything, and the knowledge curdled inside her like spoiled cream. When she first saw Lucien across the yard, standing beside the pecan tree with his hands clasped behind him, she froze. "Who is that boy?" Mara, who had been summoned to bring linen to the back veranda, stiffened. "My son, ma'am." "Lucien." Adeline's voice softened, almost dangerously. "Bring him to the house tomorrow. I wish to see him." Mara's breath caught, but she bowed. "Yes, ma'am." The next afternoon, Lucien stood in the grand parlor while Adeline sketched him in charcoal. The room smelled faintly of lemon oil and old paper. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, falling upon Lucien's face in a soft glow that made Adeline's breath hitch in her throat. She traced the curve of his jaw with her eyes. "Hold still," she murmured, though he hadn't moved at all. Jacques entered during the session, stopped mid-step, and frowned. "What is this?" His voice was heavy with annoyance. "Why is that boy in here?" Adeline did not look up from her sketch. "He is an unusual subject." Jacques approached, eyeing the child with suspicion. "Unusual how?" Adeline paused, her charcoal hovering. "Look at him." Jacques did. Slowly. His expression shifted, troubled. "He looks unnaturally refined." "Who is his father?" Mara, standing in the corner with her hands clasped tightly, said nothing. Adeline's voice sharpened. "Does it matter?" "It matters if I am to avoid trouble," Jacques growled. "A boy like this invites questions. I do not like questions." Lucien's eyes lifted to meet Jacques'. For a moment the room felt colder. Jacques snapped, "Lower your eyes, boy." Lucien did not move. Mara nearly collapsed with fear. She stepped forward. "Lucien," she whispered urgently, "look down." Slowly, smoothly, Lucien's gaze dropped to the floor. Jacques exhaled sharply. "Take him out. Now." Mara guided her son out of the parlor, her heart pounding. Behind them, Jacques muttered to his wife, "End this foolishness. You know how people talk." Adeline's voice was icy. "Let them talk." But she did end the sketch sessions, at least publicly. Privately, she found excuses to summon Lucien. Sometimes she claimed she needed him to fetch books from her library. Other times she insisted on teaching him posture, though the boy already carried himself with unnerving grace. On one such afternoon, with the windows open to the scent of jasmine, Adeline stood before him. Her hands trembled slightly. "You are aware of your appearance, are you not?" she asked. Lucien said nothing. "Men and women will want things from you," she whispered. "They will try to claim you, control you, break you." Her fingers lifted toward his face, hovering an inch from his skin. "You must be careful." Before she could touch him, the door slammed open. Rutherford Hale, the overseer, stepped inside red-faced. "Miss Adeline, your husband wants a word." Adeline's expression shifted from fascination to fury. "Tell him I am occupied." Rutherford narrowed his eyes at Lucien. "Boy supposed to be in the field, not standing here like some ornament." "He is not yours to command," Adeline snapped. Rutherford's lip curled. "Every one of them is mine to command, including him." Lucien met Rutherford's glare without flinching. Something ancient flickered in his eyes. Rutherford took a step forward. "Lower your—" "Enough," Adeline hissed. "Remove yourself from my house." Rutherford left, but not without looking back at Lucien with a hatred that was no longer professional, it was personal. That evening, as the sun slid low over the cane fields, Mara found Rutherford waiting beside the quarters, his jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. "You keep that boy away from the mistress," he growled. Mara kept her chin high. "He do nothing wrong. He exist wrong," Rutherford shouted. "That boy gone be the ruin of this place." Mara's voice trembled. "He a child." "He ain't a child," Rutherford spat. "He's something else. And you know it." She stepped closer. "You leave him be." Rutherford's look darkened. "You talk too bold for someone with no power." Mara held his gaze, refusing to back down, though her hands trembled behind her skirt. Rutherford stared at her a long moment, then turned and stalked off toward the barn. Mara waited until he was gone before sinking to her knees, her breath shaking. She knew. Deep down she knew. Something was coming. Days passed, but tension hung over the estate like a storm cloud refusing to break. Adeline watched Lucien more closely than ever. Rutherford avoided looking at him directly, as though afraid the boy might see something inside him. Even the other enslaved workers began stepping around Lucien with nervous space, whispering whenever he passed. One evening, Mara pulled Lucien into the shadow of the quarters, gripping his shoulders with trembling hands. "Listen to me," she whispered. "You stay away from that house. Stay away from that mistress. And stay away from that overseer. Trouble gone come and I won't be able to stop it." Lucien's eyes shone in the fading light. Mara cupped his face. "You hear me?" He did. But trouble had already begun. And it would strike faster than any of them expected. The night Mara vanished, the air over Bayou Lafourche felt wrong. Too still. Too warm. Even the frogs had fallen silent, as though the swamp itself held its breath. A thin fog drifted between the quarters, carrying the faint, sour scent of river rot. Lucien, now 12, lay awake on his straw pallet, staring at the ceiling as shadows moved like restless spirits. He felt it before it happened. A pressure in the air. A shift in the quiet. A sensation that someone was watching the quarters from outside. Eliza slept deeply beside her younger siblings in the next pallet over. The rest of the room breathed in slow, weary rhythms. Only Lucien's eyes were open when the faintest scrape came from outside, metal against wood, hushed footsteps, a muffled whisper. Lucien sat up. Mara, on the opposite side of the room, stiffened immediately. She rose without sound, her bare feet silent on the packed dirt floor. When she reached Lucien, she knelt, pressing a shaking hand to his cheek. "Stay here," she whispered. "Don't move." He shook his head once, slow but firm. Mara's eyes glistened. "Hush now. Mama gone, step outside and see. I be back." She lied. Lucien knew she lied. She stood, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and disappeared through the door. It swung shut behind her with a soft thud. The room fell silent. Lucien waited. 1 minute. 2, 3. Then voices. Low, angry, trying to stay quiet. Lucien moved toward the window, his heartbeat slow and deliberate. He peered through the crack between the boards. Rutherford Hale stood near the steps of the quarters, lantern in hand, its flame pulling sharp shadows across his face. Beside him stood 2 men from a neighboring estate. Hired muscle. Men who did the ugly things planters preferred not to witness. Mara stood barefoot in the dirt, her shawl wrapped tightly around her. Rutherford's voice was barely controlled. "Where is he?" Mara didn't answer. "I asked you a question," he hissed. "Where is the boy?" Lucien's fingers curled against the wall. Mara lifted her chin. "He ain't yours." Rutherford stepped forward, grabbing her arm. "You think you can hide him? You think you can disobey me?" Mara yanked her arm free. "I ain't hiding him. He asleep like every child should be this time of night." Rutherford's face twisted. "He ain't no child. He's something else, and your stubbornness gone be the death of you." One of the hired men muttered, "Drag her off. We ain't got all night." Mara's eyes flicked once, only once, toward the crack in the window where Lucien watched. Her gaze said everything. "Run. Hide. What?" Lucien didn't move. Rutherford grabbed her again, this time by the hair. She didn't scream, didn't fight back. She only stared at him with a coldness that rattled even his hardened bones. "You keepin' secrets," he growled. "You think I don't know? You think I ain't seen the way that boy look at people? Look through people?" Mara spat in his face. Rutherford jerked back, stunned. Then his rage exploded. "Take her," he snarled. The men seized her by the arms. Mara struggled now, desperation surging. "Lucien," she cried. It wasn't a call, it was a warning. Lucien's breath caught, his chest burning. Eliza stirred beside him, half awake. "What's happenin'?" she whispered. Lucien didn't answer. He was already on his feet, moving silently toward the door. Outside, the men dragged Mara toward the old barn behind the quarters, a place no one entered after dark. The lantern light spilled across the grass, making their shadows long and monstrous. "No!" Mara shouted. "He just a boy." Rutherford hit her, a sharp crack in the night. She sagged but did not fall. Lucien reached the steps of the quarters just as the men shoved Mara inside the barn. He slipped behind a rain barrel near the wall and waited, breath steady. His fingers dug into the damp earth. His eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, catching every movement, every shift of light. Inside the barn, voices rose. She fightin' too much. Shut her up. A struggle. A crash. A muffled cry. Lucien closed his eyes. His jaw locked. Then silence. The lantern inside the barn flickered once, twice, then went dark. Rutherford emerged first, wiping his hands on his trousers, breath heavy. The two hired men followed, pale and shaken. You ain't say we had to, one muttered. Rutherford cut him off. She left us no choice. That boy gone? No, the other man whispered. Rutherford turned sharply. He knows nothing. And if he does, he won't live long enough to say so. They walked away, disappearing into the fog. Lucien waited, counting every step, every heartbeat. Only when the night settled into its heavy hush again did he move. He slipped to the barn door. The old wood creaked softly. Inside, the air smelled of hay, sweat, and something metallic. Mara lay crumpled near an overturned barrel. Her shawl was torn, her hair loose, her eyes half open but unseeing. Lucien dropped to his knees beside her. Her chest rose once, barely. She exhaled a thin, trembling breath. Baby, she whispered. Lucien bent close. Don't speak. Her voice cracked. Don't ever speak. Silence gone, keep you alive. Tears blurred his vision. I love you, she breathed. Always. Her hand fell from his cheek. The barn seemed to tilt, but Lucien did not cry out. He did not scream. He did not move. He simply folded forward, forehead resting against her still chest. The boy who had never spoken made no sound at all. By dawn, the overseers claimed Mara had run away. By noon, they burned her few possessions. By dusk, a piece of her torn cloth, blood dried deep into the fibers, was found beneath the big house steps. And Lucien, standing silently among the gathering crowd, knew exactly who had put it there. What he did not know was that the price of his mother's death had already been written. In New Orleans. In the auction house. In blood. In the weeks following Mara's death, the plantation seemed to hold its breath. Work continued, cane still had to be cut, syrup boiled, wagons loaded, but everything felt different. The enslaved workers whispered with a fear that tasted like iron, and the white family in the big house spoke in clipped, brittle tones, their eyes darting toward Lucien with a mixture of suspicion and unease. He had not spoken a word. He had not cried. He had not changed. But something inside him had hardened like cooling metal. He watched. He listened. He waited. And the estate felt it, the strange, heavy quiet of a boy who knew too much. It was during this uneasy calm that the first letter arrived. Jacques Rousseau sat at the dining table, drinking bitter chicory coffee, when a servant handed him a sealed envelope embossed with a wax crest, 2 crossed lilies beneath a crown. An old symbol. A French one. A symbol that had no business resurfacing in Louisiana in 1851. Jacques frowned. Who delivered this? A courier from New Orleans, sir, the servant replied. Jacques cracked the seal. His eyes scanned the page once, twice. Then his face drained of color. Adeline, across the table, set down her fork. What is it? Jacques stood abruptly. Nothing you need concern yourself with. But Adeline rose as well, placing a hand on the letter. Do not insult me. Let me see. He hesitated, then handed it to her. The letter was written in elegant French, the ink so dark it almost shimmered. We have learned of the boy. We have reason to believe he belongs to us. Protect him from the overseer. Send him to New Orleans at once. Payment will be immediate. Allow no harm to come to him before transfer. Adeline read it twice, her breath catching. Belongs to us? She whispered. Who writes such a thing? Jacques shook his head. Old families. Old interests. People who meddle where they should not. But the boy. The boy is a danger to us, Jacques snapped. If these men want him, they want him for reasons that cannot mean anything good. Adeline stepped back, startled by her husband's fear. Jacques Rousseau feared nothing, not storms, not rivals, not bloodshed. But this letter had rattled him. Jacques poured himself another coffee, though his hands shook. We must get rid of him. Adeline stiffened. Get rid of him? Quietly, Jacques said. We will arrange a sale. A private one. He will not remain on this estate another month. Adeline's eyes flashed with something sharper than disappointment, something like panic. I will not have you sell him to men like that. Jacques turned on her. And what concern is he of yours? She froze, and in that moment, her silence revealed more than any confession. Jacques' face twisted. You have grown attached. Adeline did not answer. Jacques leaned in. That boy is dangerous. His mother died because of him. The overseer claims she hid things from us. If those men in New Orleans believe he carries some lineage, some secret, they will come for him whether we agree or not." Her voice trembled. "You do not know what you risk." Jacques hissed. "And you do?" Adeline lowered her gaze. In truth, she did not understand it fully. She only knew that Lucien's presence filled the house with a strange, silent tension, an attention she could not explain, a pull she did not trust herself to examine too closely. She had seen it in the way he moved, in the way his eyes held entire sentences without sound. She had felt it each time he entered the room, the air shifting subtly as though his silence carried weight. And she feared what would happen if the wrong hands claimed him. But Jacques was already giving orders. "Write to a broker," he told the servant. "Dupré. In New Orleans. Discreet. Tell him we have a boy to sell." The servant bowed and hurried off. Adeline stood frozen, her breath shallow, her fingers gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles whitened. Down by the quarters, Lucien watched a hawk circle high above the fields. He did not know about the letter. He did not know about the old crest or the French lilies. But he sensed the shift, like a cold wind moving through bone. That night, while the plantation slept, Jacques and Rutherford met in the barn where Mara had died. "You promised this matter was settled," Jacques growled. Rutherford spat tobacco onto the dirt. "She was the only thing standin' between us and that boy. She gone. The problem ain't." Jacques rubbed his temples. "He is to be sold. Sent to New Orleans. A broker is handling it." Rutherford's eyes narrowed. "You sure that's wise? City full of folks sniffin' for secrets." Jacques glared. "You forget your place, Hale?" Rutherford smiled thinly. "Ain't forgettin' a thing. Just sayin', that boy's more trouble alive than dead." Jacques grabbed his collar. "You lay a hand on him and those men in New Orleans will come for you. And they will not be polite." Rutherford stepped back, eyes full of hate. "Then get him off this land. Fast." 3 days later, a second letter arrived. Shorter this time. More urgent. "Do not auction the boy publicly. We will send a man to retrieve him. Keep him hidden until then." Jacques folded the note with trembling hands, then burned it in the hearth. But the ashes lingered in the air. At that very moment, miles away in New Orleans, a man dressed in black sat in a dimly lit parlor, reading a third copy of the same letter. He tapped the paper once, slowly. "Bring him," he murmured, "before the others find him." Behind him, another man asked, "And if Rousseau tries to sell him first?" The man in black folded the letter into his coat. "Then we will take him. No matter the cost." What Lucien did not know, could not know, was that 3 different buyers were already closing in on him. That his beauty was not the reason they wanted him. That his silence was not a flaw, but a warning. And that in less than 2 weeks, he would be chained in the back of a wagon, headed toward New Orleans, toward a destiny written long before he was born. And toward the auction that should never have happened. The morning they took Lucien from the plantation, the fog lay low and heavy across Bayou Lafourche, muffling the sound of wagon wheels and the soft clop of mule hooves. Dawn had barely cracked open when Rutherford Hale arrived at the quarters with 2 field hands and a set of iron restraints. "Bring the boy out," he barked. No one moved. The men and women preparing for the fields paused with tools in hand, their breaths held as though the very air warned them to stay still. Lucien stepped out on his own, expression calm, eyes bright in the half-light. Rutherford thrust the irons at one of the field hands. "Put him on him." The man hesitated. "He ain't resistin', sir." "Do as I say," Rutherford growled. Lucien stood perfectly still as the iron cuffs locked around his wrists. His skin didn't flinch, not even when the cold metal bit into him. His face remained unreadable, which only infuriated Rutherford further. "Get him on the wagon." The wagon waited at the edge of the yard, canvas top drawn, wheels muddy from last night's rain. Jonah, the hired-out worker from the previous auction day, held the reins. His shoulders were tense, his jaw set. He had not been told who he would be transporting until Rutherford shoved the boy forward. "You drivin' him to New Orleans," Rutherford said. "Straight to Dupré." Jonah stared at Lucien for a long moment before nodding. Lucien climbed into the back of the wagon without being forced, settling onto the rough wooden boards. The chains rattled softly. Jonah watched him through the canvas flap. "You understand where you goin'?" Jonah asked quietly. Lucien met his eyes. There was no fear there. Just depth. Deep enough that Jonah looked away first. Rutherford slapped the mule with his riding crop. "Move out. And don't stop unless you got to." The wagon lurched forward, rattling past the fields, past the pecan tree, past the very barn where Mara had taken her last breath. Lucien's gaze lingered there as it receded, but he gave no sign of the memories clawing beneath his ribs. The estate disappeared behind them, swallowed by morning fog. They rode in silence for nearly an hour before Jonah finally spoke. "I heard about your mama." Lucien's eyes shifted. "I ain't saying it to hurt you," Jonah murmured. "But folks whispered. Some say she run. Some say she didn't." Lucien's hands tightened around the wooden bench. Jonah lowered his voice. "You know the truth, don't you?" Lucien blinked once. Jonah sighed. "Figured." He glanced toward the road ahead. Cypress roots twisted through the mud. Spanish moss hung like ghost shrouds from the branches overhead. The bayou buzzed with insects, alive with hidden creatures and secrets. "You ain't like other boys," Jonah continued. "Ain't gotta speak for a man to see that." Lucien looked outward again, eyes tracking something only he seemed to notice. Jonah hesitated. "I ain't gonna hurt you. I just wanna understand." Before Lucien could respond, not with words but with a shift in his gaze, the wagon rounded a bend and nearly collided with a mounted patrol. 3 white men blocked the road, rifles slinged over shoulders. Jonah pulled hard on the reins, bringing the wagon to a jolting stop. "Morning," the lead patrolman called. "Haulin' freight?" Jonah forced a neutral tone. "Bringing this one to New Orleans for sale." The patrolman rode closer, peering beneath the flap. His eyes widened the moment he saw Lucien. "Well now," he murmured. "Ain't he something dot?" Another patrolman dismounted, approaching the wagon like a man approaching a curious animal. "Stand up," he ordered. Lucien didn't move. "I said stand up." Lucien slowly rose to his feet. The patrolman's breath caught. He looked the boy over, his gaze narrowing. "What's wrong with him? Why he look like that?" Jonah tensed. "Ain't nothing wrong with him. He just quiet." The patrolman shook his head slowly. "I seen quiet. This ain't quiet. This something else." Lucien's eyes met his. The patrolman stepped back as though struck. "Lord above, what are you?" Jonah moved quickly. "We need to be on our way. He due at auction by tomorrow." The patrolman swallowed. "Take him. And take the fast road." Jonah whipped the reins before further questions arose. The wagon rolled away, leaving the patrolmen staring after them, whispering among themselves. As the miles passed, the sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the fog. They crossed wooden bridges, skirted flooded fields, and passed isolated shacks where barefoot children froze to watch them go by. At midday, they stopped near a patch of shade where a fallen log sat half submerged in water. Jonah handed Lucien a tin cup of water. The boy took it without hesitation, drinking slowly. Jonah watched him. "You ain't scared," he said. "Why ain't you scared? They taking you to be sold. God knows where." Lucien set the cup down and looked at Jonah with an expression so calm it felt unnatural. Jonah shook his head. "I don't understand you. You didn't need to." By nightfall, they reached the outskirts of New Orleans, the city glowing with lanterns, smoke curling from chimneys, riverboats churning the dark Mississippi. The closer they came to the French Quarter, the louder the city became, voices, laughter, horses, music drifting from taverns. But beneath the noise, Jonah felt a dread coiling in his gut. Something was wrong here. Something waited for the boy. Something old. They turned down St. Louis Street as the sky dimmed into purple dusk. When the gates of the St. Louis Hotel came into view, Jonah hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Lucien noticed. "You listen to me," Jonah whispered quickly. "I don't know who these men are. I don't know why they want you. But stay sharp. Don't trust nobody." Lucien blinked once. "Good," Jonah said. "You understand." As they rolled under the archway of the auction hotel, Jonah felt every hair rise on his neck. Something in the air changed. A shift. A weight. He looked back at Lucien one last time. "I'll say this once," Jonah murmured. "There's danger waitin' for you in that place. I feel it." Lucien's eyes met his. Jonah swallowed. "And trouble followin' close behind." The holding cells beneath the St. Louis Hotel were carved from stone, cold, echoing chambers originally built to store wine and dry goods before someone realized they were perfect for men awaiting sale. The walls sweated moisture from the river air. The only light came from 2 lanterns hanging at opposite ends of the corridor, their flames swaying in the drafts. Lucien was placed in the 3rd cell. The hinges groaned as the guard shoved him inside. Chains rattled around his wrists as he sat on the narrow wooden bench, his eyes scanning every corner of the small chamber. Jonah remained outside the bars, uneasy, hands twisting at his sides. You gon' be all right? Jonah asked quietly. Lucien turned toward him. His gaze held no fear. Jonah exhaled. You something else, boy? Before Jonah could say more, a voice echoed down the corridor. Move aside. We must inspect the merchandise. Jonah stiffened. A group of 5 wealthy buyers, 3 men, 2 women, approached with the casual arrogance of people who believed money could shield them from anything. Their clothes were finely tailored, their boots polished, their faces expectant. The guard stepped aside. This the one. The eldest man, a planter with silver-streaked hair and a pointed beard, lifted a lantern closer to the bars. Well, he murmured, the rumors were not exaggerated. The women leaned forward. Oh my, one whispered. The other pressed a gloved hand to her throat. I have never seen features so. Perfect, the younger man finished. Lucien held their stares without flinching. The lantern light caught his golden eyes, making them glow. The silver-haired man frowned. Why does he keep looking at me? Tell him to stop. The guard slapped the bars. Boy, look down. Lucien didn't move. The younger man chuckled. Let him stare. Does a painting offend when it looks back? The guard bristled. He's supposed to obey. Jonah stepped forward. He hear you fine. He just don't listen. The wealthy group turned to him with a mildness that felt more threatening than anger. And who are you? The eldest man asked. Wagon driver, Jonah replied, eyes lowered. Then remained silent, one of the women said, voice clipped. Jonah's jaw tightened, but he stepped back. The inspection continued. The silver-haired man gestured. Open the cell. I wish to examine him more closely. The guard hesitated. Something in his posture suggested he did not enjoy being inside the same space as the boy. But orders were orders. He unlocked the cell. The wealthy group filed in. Lucien did not stand. He did not shift. Not until the eldest man reached for his chin. Look up, the man commanded. Lucien's eyes rose, slow and deliberate. The elder man inhaled sharply. What kind of mother produces a face like this? The man muttered. No one answered. What kind of father? He pressed. Jonah watched from the corridor, heart pounding. He could feel something swirling in that small cell. A tension, a pressure that built with every second the buyers remained inside. One of the women leaned close, almost breathless. He is unnatural. A doctor in the group, distinguished by his small spectacles and neat mustache, stepped forward. Not unnatural, he corrected, voice trembling. Unprecedented. He raised the lantern higher, inspecting Lucien's jawline, eyes, symmetry, posture. I have studied anatomy for 27 years, the doctor murmured, and I have never seen proportions like this. He knelt. Lucien's eyes tracked every motion, perfectly symmetrical, perfectly balanced, as though, the doctor swallowed, as though crafted. The eldest man's eyes narrowed. Crafted by what? By whom? The doctor corrected softly. The guard scoffed. He's just a mute boy. The doctor shook his head. No, he is not. The eldest man straightened. I want him. Name the price. The guard looked uneasy. Ain't up to me. Dupre handles that. Well, fetch him, the man snapped. But before the guard could turn, a sudden metallic clang echoed from deeper in the corridor. A second guard ran past, pale-faced. Fire in the courtyard, he shouted. Some drunk set a torch too close to the awnings. The buyer stiffened. Then we should finish here quickly, the eldest man muttered, before chaos erupts. The doctor stood slowly. I advise caution. This boy, there is something about him that unsettles me. Unsettles? The younger man mocked. He is beauty, doctor. Not a ghost. But the doctor did not look convinced. Lucien stared at the man, aware of something flickering across the doctor's expression. Fear. Not of Lucien's strength, nor his silence, but of recognition. As though the doctor had seen something like Lucien once before. Briefly. Terribly. And never spoken of it again. When the wealthy group finally left the cell, Jonah waited until their footsteps faded before he stepped close again. You all right? Jonah whispered. Lucien blinked once. Jonah leaned in. They gon' bid for you tomorrow. Fight over you. But you listen good, none of 'em mean you well. Lucien's gaze dropped to the tin water cup on the floor. A single drop trembled on the rim. Jonah whispered, You understand, don't you? Trouble's comin'. Lucien lifted his eyes. Another blink. Jonah swallowed. Yeah, you understand. Far above them, Feet thundered across the hotel floors as the fire was extinguished. Buyers whispered nervously. Guards shouted orders. But deep below, in the stone belly of the St. Louis Hotel, Lucien remained still, waiting, calm as a storm held in a bottle. And the night stretched long, too long, before the morning of the auction that would change everything. By sunrise, all of New Orleans felt pulled toward the St. Louis Hotel as though by an invisible tide. The auction hall, usually busy, often loud, now throbbed with a feverish anticipation that made even seasoned traders uneasy. Word had spread throughout the night, reaching taverns, riverfront warehouses, Creole salons, and cotton offices alike. The boy was real. The beauty was real. And today he would be sold. By 8 o'clock, the marble-floored rotunda was packed. Men fanned themselves in the thick, humid air. Women pretended to be scandalized even as curiosity lit their eyes. Whispers ricocheted off the high ceiling like trapped bees. Is he really mute? They say 12 men already offered private sums. I heard his mother was killed for protecting him. Nonsense, he's just a pretty fancy boy. Pretty? No. They say he ain't natural. Henri Dupré stood near the block, pale as chalk, wiping his brow every 10 seconds. He had lost sleep, appetite, and nearly his sanity preparing for this day. The wealthy Creole trio from yesterday had returned, dressed even more formally, their expressions sharpened with determination. Another group, a rival set of buyers, waited in the back, their dark coats and quiet conversation hinting at deeper motives. The guard approached Henri in a hurry. He's ready, sir. Henri nodded, though his stomach twisted violently. Then bring him. The crowd surged forward as two guards escorted Lucien through the side passage. Gasps filled the hall. Lucien walked with a strange, effortless stillness, no bowed shoulders, no shuffle of fear. His wrists were bound in front of him, but his posture remained upright, almost regal. The morning light filtering through the tall windows caught the lines of his face, the curve of his cheekbone, the faint golden shimmer of his iris. Several women pressed handkerchiefs to their lips. Some men frowned, disturbed by their own reactions. A few stepped back as if facing something they weren't meant to witness. Henri cleared his throat shakily. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves. Lucien stepped up onto the block, and for a moment the entire hall went silent. Completely silent. Then the youngest bidder, the same impulsive Creole man from the inspection, exhaled shakily. Mon Dieu! It broke the spell. The noise returned all at once. Henri lifted his gavel. Shall we begin at 500? Someone shouted. Several heads whipped around. 6, another voice snapped. 800. 1,000. 1,200. The numbers flew too fast for Henri to track. His voice cracked. Gentlemen, ladies, please, let us proceed in order. But order no longer existed. One man lunged at another, shoving him into the benches. A cane struck someone's shoulder. Two women began yelling over each other, faces flushed with something like anger or desire. Jonah, standing at the back, froze as he watched chaos ripple outward. This ain't right, he whispered. Ain't never seen folk act like this. The wealthy Creole trio moved forward as one unit. The eldest man raised his cane high. 3,000, he shouted. Yes, sir. A hush swept the crowd. No enslaved man in the city had ever sold for that price. Not even the most skilled carpenters, blacksmiths, or foremen. But before Henri could strike the gavel, 4,000. Every head turned toward the rear doors. A rival delegation entered. 3 men dressed impeccably in dark coats, their boots immaculate, their expressions cold and fixed. The leader, tall and sharp-featured, strode forward. Henri's voice trembled. Sir, you are late. The bidding? We are on time, the man corrected calmly. 4,000. The Creole trio bristled. You dare interfere, the eldest snapped. The tall man smiled without warmth. Interference implies you ever had a rightful claim. A ripple of tension snapped through the hall. Henri stammered, Very well, 4,000, do I hear? He never finished. A scream shattered the air. A woman, pale as milk, clutched her temples. His eyes. What is he? She collapsed to her knees, fainting. The crowd erupted again, pushing, shouting, climbing over benches to escape the tightening crush. Someone knocked over a lantern. Oil spilled across the floor, flames licking up a tapestry. Guards raced to contain it. Put it out. Henri shrieked. For God's sake. Lucien remained still on the block, unmoving, untouched by the frenzy around him. The tall rival buyer stepped forward abruptly. This sale is over. The boy comes with us. The eldest Creole man snarled. Over my dead body. That can be arranged, the stranger replied quietly. Before the two sides could collide, the exterior doors slammed open again. A breathless guard rushed inside. A fire spread to the courtyard. We must evacuate. Panic rippled like lightning. People surged toward doors. Chairs toppled. The fire near the tapestry hissed and flared. Henri tried to regain control. Everyone stay calm. Calm. But calm was a corpse buried beneath the marble floor. In the chaos, someone grabbed Lucien's arm, one of the Creole men. Quickly, before they steal him. Another hand seized Lucien's other arm, the tall stranger. He belongs with us. Lucien did not move, did not resist, did not help, did not fear. The two factions began tugging as if he were a rope in a vicious game. And then, a sharp metallic crack echoed through the hall. A masked figure, tall, cloaked, unrecognizable, had appeared on the balcony above the block, a pistol in hand. His voice boomed. Unhand him. The room froze. Even the fire seemed to pause. The masked figure leapt down from the balcony, landing with a thud, knocking over two men. He struck the nearest guard with the pistol's handle. The guard crashed to the floor. Chaos reignited. The masked man lunged toward Lucien, slicing the chain between his wrists with a hidden blade. He whispered, so close only Lucien heard. It is time you remembered. Then all hell broke loose around them. And in the rising smoke, with screams echoing off marble columns, the most dangerous chapter of Lucien's life began. The moment the blade sliced through Lucien's chains, the noise in the auction hall warped, screams stretching thin, voices twisting into echoes as though time itself stumbled. Firelight flickered violently against marble pillars, smoke curling in dark, choking ribbons. Men trampled one another in their desperation to flee, while others fought to seize the prize standing silently on the block. But Lucien did not move. Not even as the masked figure grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the side hallway. Come, the stranger commanded. Lucien's eyes flickered once, an acknowledgement. He stepped off the block with an eerie calm, slipping between overturned chairs and abandoned bidding cards. Behind them, Henri Dupré shouted for guards, his voice cracking with terror. Stop him. Stop them. The boy. No one listened. The masked man led Lucien through the side passage just as a flaming tapestry collapsed onto the floor. Smoke surged into the corridor. Lucien moved with a strange, precise grace, untouched by the panic that swallowed the hall behind them. Keep low, the masked man hissed. Jonah appeared at the passage entrance, coughing violently. Lucien. The masked figure stopped cold, instinctively drawing a blade. Jonah raised both hands. I ain't trying to stop you. Just, he don't belong in this mess. Lucien turned toward Jonah, something like relief flickering across his features. Brief, almost invisible. The masked man's voice was low, dangerous. Who is he? Someone who helped me, Jonah answered quickly. Let him come. The masked stranger hesitated. It was Lucien who made the decision. He reached out, lightly, touching Jonah's forearm. The masked man nodded. Fine. But stay close. They moved down the hallway just as a group of guards spotted them. There. Take the boy, now. The guards rushed forward, boots hammering against the floor. The masked man pushed Jonah and Lucien behind him. Stay back. Lucien didn't blink. He studied the guards as though measuring their weight, their speed, their fear. The first guard swung a baton. The masked man ducked, grabbed the guard's arm, twisted. A sharp crack. The man screamed, collapsing. Another lunged with a knife. Jonah shouted, watch it. Lucien stepped forward. The knife slashed toward him. He didn't flinch. Instead, he moved aside with a fluid shift of weight so fast the guard stumbled. The blade missed by an inch. The masked man seized the moment, slamming the guard's head into the wall. Blood splattered across the white plaster. Jonah stared, stunned. How'd he? The masked man grabbed Lucien's wrist. Later. But more guards were coming, 5 of them, rifles raised. Stop or we fire. Jonah grabbed Lucien. Down. The masked man shoved them behind a support column as bullets tore through the hallway. Marble chips exploded off the walls. Smoke thickened. The masked man hurled a lantern at their feet. It shattered, oil igniting in a violent roar. Fire surged up the walls, forcing the guards back. Jonah coughed, dragging Lucien through the smoke. Gunshots echoed behind them. One guard screamed as flames caught his coat. Another dropped his rifle. The hallway became a battlefield. Beat, panic, gunfire. and Lucien's silent, ghost-like movements cutting through it all. They reached a narrow service passage. The masked man slammed the door behind them. "We must hurry." Jonah bent over, hands on his knees, coughing hard. Who the hell are you?" The masked man pulled off his hood, but not the mask. "You may call me a friend." Jonah snorted. "Ain't no friend kills 3 men in 10 seconds. The masked man's tone hardened. "They would have killed him in 2. He looked at Lucien. Lucien stared back, eyes unreadable. The masked stranger lowered his voice. "He knows me. Somewhere inside he knows." Jonah shook his head. "How? He never met you." "He knew your mother," the masked man said. Lucien's eyes sharpened. His breath hitched barely. A lightning crack of memory flashed behind his gaze. Jonah froze. "You knew Mara?" The masked man nodded once. "She sent word before she died." Lucien's hand clenched. The masked man continued. "She told me everything she could. Told me what he would face. Told me what he carried in his blood." Jonah swallowed. "And what's that supposed to mean?" "Not here," the masked man replied. "Too many years." A distant explosion shook dust from the ceiling. Shouts echoed from further down the hall. Jonah looked back anxiously. "They comin'? They ain't stopping till they get him." The masked man placed a firm hand on Lucien's shoulder. "Then we must move. Now." They ran. Down the passage. Into another corridor. Past linen closets and servant stairways. Smoke curled behind them, chasing their heels. They reached a crossroads, 2 identical hallways branching left and right. Jonah pointed. "This way leads to the kitchens." The masked man shook his head. "No. Too many windows. Too exposed." "Then that way." Jonah tried again. "Dead end." Jonah cursed. "So where?" Lucien stepped forward, turning his head slightly, as though listening to something the others couldn't hear. He walked toward the right-hand wall. Jonah frowned. "Boy, that stone. Ain't nothin'." Lucien placed his palm against the wall. The masked man inhaled sharply. "Of course. The old storage tunnels, they sealed them decades ago." Jonah stared. "How he know that?" The masked man didn't answer. He drew a hidden blade and wedged it along a faint seam in the stones. With a grunt, he levered an old panel loose. Dust billowed outward. Behind it, a dark, narrow tunnel sloped downward. "There," the masked man said. "This connects to the riverfront." Jonah exhaled. "Then let's go." The masked man looked at Lucien. "You first." Lucien stepped through the opening without hesitation. As the tunnel swallowed them in darkness, Jonah whispered, "Boy, how'd you know that wall opened?" Lucien didn't speak, but the masked man did. "Because Mara taught him where to run." Jonah shivered. More guards entered the burning hallway behind them. The tunnel door closed just in time. And deep beneath the St. Louis Hotel, where smoke and screams could not reach, the truth began tightening its grip around Lucien, like a noose drawing closer with every step. The tunnel swallowed them in a suffocating darkness. The air was stale, thick with years of forgotten dust. Water dripped rhythmically somewhere in the black, echoing down the stone shaft like a clock counting the seconds to something inevitable. Lucien walked ahead of the others, his steps soundless, his breathing steady. Jonah followed, bumping into walls more than once. "Lord," he muttered, voice low, "I can't see a damn thing." The masked man produced a small lantern, striking its flint. A weak flame flickered to life, throwing trembling light along the narrow corridor. Jonah glanced at the walls. "This place look older than the hotel." "It is," the masked man replied. "Older than the city itself." Jonah frowned. "How you know?" The masked man lifted the lantern. Strange markings, curved, ancient-looking carvings, lined the stone. These tunnels were built by Spaniards before the French took the territory. Some say even earlier. Most of the entrances were sealed when the hotel was renovated. But Mara, she knew places others forgot. Lucien paused, his hand brushing the old carvings. The lantern glow caught in his golden irises, making them burn like coals. Jonah watched him. "You knew his mama well?" The masked man hesitated. "More than well. I respected her." His voice softened beneath the mask. "She was a woman of strength, of knowledge. She knew more about the world than most." Jonah swallowed. "Then why ain't you come for her? Why ain't you saved her when?" Lucien abruptly stopped walking. Jonah's words caught in his throat. The boy had turned, staring at the masked stranger with a look that was no longer empty silence, but accusation. The masked man lowered his lantern. "Because she told me not to." Jonah blinked. What? She said her time was ending and mine was too late. His voice thickened. She said the only one worth saving was him. Lucien's jaw tightened. Something in his eyes flickered. Pain, rage, memory, before going still again. Jonah stepped closer. Save him from what, exactly? The masked man exhaled. From the people who seek to claim him. From those who know the truth of his blood. Jonah crossed his arms. You keep saying that word, truth. Speak plain. The masked stranger lifted the lantern toward Lucien. Do you know why they want you? He asked softly. Do you know why men in that hall were ready to kill each other? Lucien didn't respond. But his eyes didn't waver. The masked man continued. It is not beauty, though that is the first thing they notice. It is not silence, though that frightens them. It is lineage. He stepped closer. Your father, the masked man said, was no common man. Jonah stiffened. How you know his father? Mara never spoke of him. She dared not. The masked man's voice dropped. His father was a French nobleman. One of the old bloodlines that fled the mainland after the revolution. Men with secrets running through their veins. Jonah's brow furrowed. Old bloodline? What that mean? Power, the masked man whispered. Power that should have died with their ancestors. Power the Creole elite still whisper about. A face like Lucien's? It is more than chance. It is inheritance. Lucien stared at him, unmoving. The masked man went on. His father was not just a nobleman, he was heir to a dormant house. One whose mark appears in hidden archives, private ledgers, and old Catholic registries. Jonah shook his head. Boy ain't white. No, the masked man agreed. But blood does not obey the laws men write on paper. It carries what it carries. And Lucien carries something they want. He gestured toward Lucien's face. Look at him. Look carefully. Every line. Every proportion. It is not natural. It is engineered. His voice lowered further. There were rumors, old families experimenting with selective breeding, trying to preserve certain features, certain traits, almost like sculptors shaping a lineage. Jonah recoiled. That's madness. Is it? The masked man murmured. Not when money and legacy are involved. Not when people believe beauty is a form of power. Jonah shook his head. You saying this boy's some kind of experiment? No, the masked man answered. He is a result. Lucien's eyes burned with a quiet fury. Jonah turned to him. You know any of this? Lucien remained silent, but for the first time his expression cracked. The pain of memory. The image of Mara's body on the dirt. The sound of Rutherford's voice. The blood on the barn floor. Jonah stepped forward. You know who killed your mama? Lucien's breath shuddered, the smallest movement but noticeable. Jonah swallowed. Say it, Jonah whispered, forgetting the boy never spoke. Say you know. Lucien lifted his hand. Drew a single line across his own throat. Jonah's face drained of color. The masked man nodded. He knows. A distant boom shook dust from the ceiling, another section of the hotel collapsing. We're out of time, the masked man said. We must reach the river before the factions find the exits. Jonah grabbed Lucien's shoulder. But before we go, before we run, you owe him the truth. All of it. The masked man met Lucien's eyes. The lantern flame trembled between them. Your mother died, he whispered, because she hid you from the men who killed your father. Lucien's eyes widened. A tremor ran through him. They murdered him, the masked man said, voice breaking for the first time. And they would have murdered you next. Mara gave her life to delay them. Silence wrapped around them like a shroud. Lucien's chest rose once, sharp, ragged. Then he whispered, a sound so soft Jonah almost thought he imagined it. Who? Jonah froze. The masked man froze. The world froze. Lucien had spoken. For the first time. The masked man swallowed. The overseer. Hail. Rage ignited inside Lucien like a silent explosion. The lantern flame flared. Jonah stepped back. Lord help us. The masked man lowered his voice. Not Lord. Lucien. He handed the boy a small blade. You want answers? He whispered. Come claim them. Lucien closed his fingers around the hilt. The tunnel ahead seemed to darken. And for the first time in his life, Lucien walked not in silence, but with purpose sharpened into something deadly. The tunnel exhaled them onto the riverfront like a dark mouth spitting out secrets. The Mississippi's heavy fog clung to their clothes, muffling lantern lights and swallowing the sounds of chaos from the St. Louis hotel behind them. Smoke drifted upward in trembling ribbons, black silhouettes flickering against the morning sky. Jonah scanned the wharf. Where we go now? They gone search the quarter. They gone search the docks. There ain't nowhere safe. The masked man pointed downriver. There. He nodded toward a row of old warehouses, half-rotted, bordering the edge of the wharf. Hale will run there first. Jonah blinked. Hale? How you know where he'd go? The masked man didn't turn. Because I know where a coward hides when he realizes the truth is comin' for him. Lucien said nothing, but his grip around the blade tightened. And for the first time, rage burned under his silence. Not wild, not frantic, but cold. Precise. Focused like a lantern flame narrowed into a needle. They moved together, Lucien leading, the masked stranger beside him, Jonah following with anxious glances over his shoulder. Smoke from the hotel drifted further, the scent of burning cloth mingling with the harsh tang of river tar. They passed boats moored at crooked angles. Dockworkers scurried like nervous rats, avoiding eye contact. Word was spreading fast. The auction went bad. There was a fire. Men died. They say the boy ain't human, ain't natural. But Lucien barely heard them. His mother's last breath still whispered in his ears. Her hand still trembled in his memory. Her whisper, silence gone keep you alive, lay cracked at his feet. He wasn't silent anymore. The masked man spoke softly as they neared the warehouses. This is where Hale would hide if he escaped the hotel fire. If he thought he could regroup. Reach allies. Jonah squinted. You sure he here? Yes. Boss. He's afraid of the boy. Men like him run to shadows when they're afraid. Lucien stepped ahead, shoulders squared. The old warehouse loomed before them, a hollow skeleton of timber and rusted metal. Its roof sagged. Its windows were broken. The river lapped beneath its pilings, dark and slow. A lantern flickered inside. Jonah whispered, Lord help us. The masked man touched his arm. Stay outside unless things go wrong. Unless. Jonah breathed. Ain't nothing here that ain't already wrong. But he stepped back. Lucien entered first, the blade in his hand, the fog curling behind him like a living thing. Inside, sunlight pierced the broken roof in thin streaks, illuminating dust suspended in the air. The warehouse smelled of old wood, spilled grain, and fear. A voice trembled from the shadows. Oh, brittle. You ain't supposed to be alive. Lucien didn't blink. Rutherford Hale stepped into the light, shirt torn, face smeared with soot, eyes wild. He clutched a pistol in one shaking hand. His other hand bled where embers from the hotel fire had marked him. You were supposed to die in that mess, he spat. Burned. Lost. Gone from this world. Lucien stepped forward. Hale stepped back, breathing fast. Don't come near me. The masked man emerged behind Lucien, weapon drawn. Jonah peered through a crack in the wall, trembling. Hale's eyes darted between them. You don't understand. That boy ain't right. Never was. Something wrong in him. Something his mama kept hidden. Lucien's knuckles whitened around the blade. Hale's voice cracked. I warned Jacques. I told him the boy would be trouble. And your mama? His face twisted with something between fear and hatred. She knew it. She tried to hide it. Tried to hide you. She was gone bring ruin to the whole estate. Lucien took another step. Stop. Hale screamed. But Lucien didn't. He kept walking, the floor creaking beneath his feet. The masked man lowered his voice. Hale. You know why he's here. Hale's breath shuddered. I didn't mean to kill her. She fought back. She spit in my face. Lucien's silence struck harder than any words. Hale pointed the pistol at him. His hand shook violently. You ain't speaking now? You spoke in that tunnel, didn't you? I heard about it. One word. One damn word. Lucien stopped an arm's length away. The warehouse crackled, the old timber ticking in the heat. Lucien raised his eyes and spoke again. Why? A single word. Quiet. Steady. Sharper than any blade. Hale staggered back. The pistol shook in his grip. Why? Lucien repeated, voice low as a grave. Hale's face crumpled. Because she wouldn't tell me who your father was. Because she lied. Because you look at people like you see their secrets. Like you see through them. Lucien stepped closer. She had to be quiet, Hale whispered. If folks knew who you really came from, if they knew about that blood, they'd have burned the whole estate to the ground. Lucien's voice was a whisper. Who? The masked man answered for Hale, cold, unflinching. His father was one of the families Hale stole from. A man with a name powerful enough that Hale killed him to cover it. Lucien froze. Hale screamed, "I didn't have a choice." Lucien lifted the blade. Hale's breath hitched. "No, wait." Lucien stepped forward. Hale fired. The bullet cut the air. But Lucien was faster. He shifted, the shot grazing past his shoulder and embedding in the wall. Before Hale could fire again, Lucien moved. Not wild. Not frenzied. Precise. The blade flashed. Hale cried out, dropping the pistol. He stumbled backward, hand clutching his forearm. Lucien held the blade to the overseer's throat. Hale trembled. "Please don't." The boy's eyes were calm, cold, unshakably clear. "You silenced her," Lucien whispered. Hale sobbed. "No, she. You silenced the wrong person." The blade cut clean. Hale collapsed onto the floor, blood pooling beneath him, dark, spreading like a shadow. Jonah covered his mouth outside the wall's crack. "Oh God." The masked man exhaled, weary but resolute. "It is done." Lucien stood over Hale's body, breathing steady, eyes bright but unreadable. Behind them, the fire from the hotel spread along the wharf, embers drifting like falling stars. The masked man placed a hand on Lucien's shoulder. "We must leave," he murmured, "before the city comes hunting." Lucien nodded once. And as they stepped out of the warehouse, Jonah trailing behind with trembling steps, the old building groaned, then collapsed inward, flames leaping skyward as though sealing the chapter forever. But New Orleans was not done with Lucien. Not yet. The fire swallowed the warehouse before anyone could raise alarm. By the time the riverfront guards arrived, only a collapsing skeleton of beams remained, flames licking upward, sparks erupting into the morning air. Dockworkers gathered in stunned clusters, whispering as the blaze painted their faces in shades of gold and ash. But Lucien, Jonah, and the masked man were already gone. They disappeared into the labyrinth of alleys that wound behind the warehouses, dark channels of brick, broken shutters, and overgrown courtyards where the noise of the wharf faded into a muted hum. The city was waking slowly, unaware it stood on the edge of a legend being born. Every step echoed with questions Jonah could not voice fast enough. "What we gon' do now? They gon' come lookin'. You know that, right? Lucien, you hurt? That bullet grazed you, let me see." Lucien simply walked, steady and silent, ignoring the faint line of blood across his shoulder. His face was unreadable, anger drained now, replaced by something quieter, heavier. The blade hung loose in his hand, its edge still stained. The masked man guided them toward the back streets near Rue de Maine. "We cannot stay here long. The factions will start searching every corner. They will want him alive. Or dead." Jonah looked at Lucien. "What they want him for now that Hale's gone?" The masked man didn't hesitate. "For the same reason they wanted him before. His bloodline." Jonah shook his head, overwhelmed. "I still don't understand what that mean. Ain't no blood worth this much trouble." The masked man turned. His voice was low and sharp. "You saw it yourself. Men with more money than mercy trying to rip each other apart just to claim him. Those families, those ancient names, they don't care about the boy. They care about what he represents. A living key to a lineage thought dead." He faced Lucien directly. "You are the last of a line that should have disappeared long ago. A line with ties to both France's fallen nobility and the Creole elite who inherited their secrets." Lucien held his gaze, not as a boy, not as property, but as someone opening the door of his identity for the first time. Jonah whispered, "Then what? He's supposed to claim some throne? Some fortune?" "No," the masked man said softly. "No throne. No wealth. Just danger." They reached a quiet courtyard. A fountain trickled weakly in the center, its basin cracked, water green from neglect. Potted palms rustled in the faint breeze. The masked man paused beside the fountain, removing his hood fully at last. His face was older than his movements suggested, lined, weathered, eyes shadowed by years of secrets. He removed the mask slowly. A deep scar ran from his temple to his jaw. Jonah inhaled sharply. "You. I know you." Lucien's eyes widened. Recognition flickered like a candle in wind. The masked man nodded. "Your mother and I grew up on the same land. Same overseer. Same whip. Same hunger for freedom." His voice trembled. "I was older. Stronger. I escaped years before she did. But she found me once, here in the city. Told me she had a son who would need protection." Lucien's throat bobbed. "She told me you were special long before the elites knew," the man continued. "She said your father died to protect you. She said the boy would carry silence like armor until he was ready." Lucien's gaze grew distant, heavy with memory. The masked man stepped closer. She gave her life to keep you hidden from those men. She died to buy you time. Jonah swallowed. So what now? They ain't gonna stop, not after what happened today. No, the masked man agreed. They won't. Lucien finally spoke, a quiet, rasping whisper. What do I do? The masked man's breath caught. Hearing Lucien speak, even 2 words, felt like witnessing a prophecy crack open. He placed a steady hand on Lucien's shoulder. You disappear. Jonah frowned. Disappear? To where? The masked man gestured toward the river. There are ships leaving for every corner of the world. France, Cuba, Mexico. Some carry cargo. Some carry stories. And some carry people who don't want to be found. He stepped even closer to Lucien. You must choose a place where your blood means nothing. Where no one knows your mother's name. Or your father's. Where your silence can turn into a new life, not a weapon. Lucien looked between the 2 men. Jonah's voice was soft. You can stay with me, you know. Folks say I ain't got much, but I got enough for another mouth. Lucien looked at him with something like gratitude, a faint, flickering warmth. But he shook his head. The masked man nodded. He understands. Staying here means death. Or worse. Jonah clenched his jaw but said nothing. A bell tolled in the distance, sharp, urgent. The city was waking to the aftermath. The masked man hurried them toward the river. We have minutes before patrols spread out. Down at the docks, fog rolled thick as wool across the water. A ship's lantern glowed faintly through the mist, signaling boarding. Workers shouted in French and Creole. The masked man pointed. That one. Bound for Havana. From there, you can go anywhere. Lucien hesitated for the first time. Jonah swallowed. You sure about this? Lucien touched his arm lightly. A silent thank you. Then he stepped toward the ship. Halfway up the gangplank, he paused, turned, looked at Jonah, then at the masked man. His voice was a whisper, but steady. Tell them she didn't die for nothing. Jonah's eyes filled. The masked man bowed his head. Lucien boarded the ship. The fog swallowed him. And by the time the sun rose fully over New Orleans, no one could say where the boy had gone. Some claimed he died in the hotel fire. Others swore a ghost with golden eyes haunted the bayou for years. Some insisted he lived in Cuba under a new name, working at a tobacco mill. There were even stories, many decades later, of a French man with a striking face who appeared in Paris salons, silent, graceful, uncanny. Whether those stories were true or just wishful thinking, no one could say for certain. But in New Orleans, among the ashes of the warehouse and the whispers of that cursed auction, one truth remained. The most beautiful boy ever sold in the St. Louis hotel had vanished, and he took the impossible secret of his lineage with him. Forever.